Hello, I'm CK, and welcome to my Mythic Tirna Scithe dungeon guide. Tirna Scithe is located on the western part of Ardenweald, contains 3 bosses, and features a maze portion, which is unique to this dungeon. Let's get started. As always, timestamps can be found in the description below for all bosses and notable trash. First up, we have Ingra Malik. This fight has 2 phases. Phase 1, you'll be dealing damage to Droman while cleaving Ingra. Phase 2, you will be hard focusing Ingra. Now, let's discuss Phase 1. In this phase, you will primarily be dealing damage to Droman. The first mechanic you'll deal with is Bewildering Pollen, which is a simple frontal cone that everyone should dodge. Next is Tears of the Forest, which throws a bunch of swirlies around the area that leave lingering pools. Dodge this and you'll be fine. Next, we have Death Shroud. This will be put up by Ingra at some point during the phase, and it will deal AoE damage and causes him to take reduced damage. The only way to prevent or remove this shield is to continue to DPS Droman until he is low health. The final ability in phase 1 is Repulsive Visage, which will fear all players around Ingra. You'll want to make sure you're positioned carefully so you don't run through too many pools that are on the ground. Once you get Droman low on health, he will become friendly and phase 2 will start. This is your burn phase. Droman will cast Droman's Wrath on Ingra, which will cause him to take 300% increased damage for 12 seconds. This is where you pop your cooldowns and burn the boss as hard as you can. Rinse and repeat these phases until the boss is dead, then make your way into the maze as you head on to Mistcaller. The second boss is Mistcaller, who has 4 main abilities. First, it's time to play Patty Cake. Tanks, this is your mechanic. Make sure you interrupt this, as if you don't, you will become disoriented and the boss will go melee other targets for 5 seconds, likely resulting in a death. Next up, it's time to play Dodgeball. Dodgeball will summon a bunch of blue arrows coming from the center of the boss in random directions. After a few seconds, she will fire projectiles in those directions. Do not get hit, as this deals massive damage and will likely one-shot you. Next up, we have everyone's favorite fox, the Illusionary Vulpin, which will chase down a random player, and if any player comes into contact with it, they become stunned for 8 seconds. There are 2 ways to deal with this. 1, you can CC and just leave it, or 2, you can kill it, as it doesn't have a ton of health. The final mechanic is called Illusionary Clone, which occurs at 70, 40, and 10% health. Mistcaller will summon 4 identical clones of her with markings over their head. Find the odd one out. So for example, if there are 3 leaves and 1 flower, kill the one with the flower. It could be more complicated than this, but you get the idea. During this time, Mistcaller will continue to do all of her abilities. However, she takes 100% reduced damage. Continue to play all of her games and dodge the mechanics until she is defeated. Then it's time to go meet Gahun's sister. The final boss is Treadover, which is a mechanically intensive fight. So let's get started. First up, Acid Expulsion. This will fire a projectile at your current location that you will need to dodge. However, the boss remembers the direction and the distance you moved. So the next time that she casts this ability, make sure you do not move the same way. So for example, if on the first cast you move left, the second cast you'll want to move right. The third cast, move forward. The fourth cast, move backwards. So on and so forth. Just never move the same way twice in a row, and you should be fine. The next mechanic could be a series of casts that need to be interrupted. The boss can cast either Parasitic Pacification, Parasitic Incapacitation, or Parasitic Domination. Whichever they decide to cast, make sure you interrupt it, as failure to do so will summon a parasite that will land on one of your party members, and they will become MC'd. So if this happens, break them out as soon as possible. The final mechanic is called Mind Link. This will connect players together via a large blue beam that you need to spread out and run away to break the beam, then group back up and continue the fight. There are also 2 intermission phases to this fight at 70 and 40% health. While she won't do any other mechanics, she simply moves to the center of the room and begins to cast Consumption, putting up a gorging shield and making them uninterruptible. You need to break the shield with damage and interrupt to stop the AoE. The AoE will be a consistent barrage of blue swirlies on the ground emanating from the boss. On top of all the other mechanics going on at the same time, this phase can be pretty hectic and has a very high amount of damage output. Healers, make sure you're prepared as intermission approaches, and DPS, be prepared to use some defensives to help your healers out during this phase. Now, let's discuss the notable trash found throughout the dungeon. First off, there are many mobs throughout this dungeon that have interruptible cast. First is the Drust Soul Cleaver, who will cast Soul Split, followed by the Drust Harvester, who will cast Harvest Essence. The first notable mob you'll encounter is the Tirna Villager, who has Bewildering Pollen, which is a frontal cone aimed at the tank and can be dodged. This will disorient, so make sure you do not get hit, especially if you're the tank, as you'll lose aggro on everything else. The second ability is Overgrowth, which is targeted at a non-tank player and will encase them in vines. If you get targeted, run into melee to allow for easy cleave and a quick breakout. Next up, you have the Drust Bowbreaker. These things hurt. First off, when they reach 50% health, they'll channel Furious Thrashing, which deals massive AoE damage. Their second ability is Bramble Burst, which will target each player and toss brambles under their feet. You do not want to get hit by this ability, and you must move as soon as the cast finishes. There are 2 poles leading up to the first boss that consist of 2 of these mobs together. Make sure you don't get both of them to 50% health at the same time, or it will likely result in a wipe. Now, let's talk about the maze. During this maze, you'll have to find the symbol that's not like the others. There are 3 things to look for. First, does the symbol have a circle? Second, is it a leaf or a flower? And finally, is it shaded or hollow? Figure out which of these are unique and hid through that door. Failure to identify the correct symbol will send you back to the start of the maze, which can add time to your run, especially in Mythic Plus. There is a good bit of trash through the maze as well. Let's talk about the major things to watch out for. As far as interrupts go, the Mistfield Tinder will cast Nourish the Forest, which is a heal and should be interrupted. The Mistveil Shaper will cast Bramblethorn Coat, which is a shield and should also be interrupted. Finally, healers should dispel the Mistveil Stinger's Anima Injection, as it deals high damage. There are 3 mini-bosses during the maze. You will only get 1 per run. Your first option is Mistveil Night Blossom, which is a tank buster. It hits your tank extremely hard and stacks a poison called Triple Bite that should be dispelled if possible. The next mini-boss option is the Mistveil Gorge Gullet, which will use Crushing Leap and force players to dodge the poisonous secretions. It also uses a Tongue Lash ability, which is a frontal cleave, so tanks make sure you keep him facing away from the group. Finally is the Mistveil Matriarch, which will cast Radiant Breath that players need to dodge, and will also cast Pool of Radiance. Make sure to move him out of the Pool of Radiance when it drops, as it will heal him. As you're making your way to Treadover, the trash doesn't do a whole lot and can mainly be AoE down. The 2 mobs to watch out for are the Spine Maw Staghorn, which you will need to interrupt Stimulate Resistance and Stimulate Regeneration. Finally, the Spine Maw Acid Gullet will target a player with volatile acid. You should spread out if you get this, as it can spread quickly between the rest of your party. If you found this guide helpful and are interested in more, I will be posting all Mythic dungeons and raid encounters on this channel. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, click on the bell icon, and give this video a like. Make sure to leave a comment below letting me know how I can further improve these guides for future content. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.